Hello, good morning. My dear students, I took the first part of William Wordsworth's poem Tintern Abbey. Now, today I'm going to take the second part. Today I'm going to talk about Tintern Abbey as an autobiographical poem of William Wordsworth. Now, I had told you that Wordsworth belonged to the 19th century and he was a worshipper of nature. To him, nature meant everything. In fact, you can say that his attitude towards nature is characterized by his simplicity and by his sublimity. And the ordinary sights and sounds of nature, usually ignored by us, naturally bring to the poet's imagination a wealth of beauty and a wealth of bliss. And the distinguishing part of Wordsworth's poetry, you can say, concerning nature is that, first of all, he talks about nature, the conception of nature as a living entity. The second part, he talks about nature's educative influence. And in the third part, he talks about the mysticism, the divinity, or rather, you can say pantheism. So, all the three stages, you can say, from the time when Wordsworth, his childhood, you can say, from his childhood to his stage of maturity as till manhood, he was able to experience different things, different learnings, and different teachings from nature. And you can say, in this particular poem, Tintern Abbey, he says that how often even before the lapse of 5 years, while he was wandering by the side of the river Wye, he says, how often, amidst those many shapes of joyless daylight, when the fretful stir unprofitable and the fever of the world have hung upon the beatings of my heart, how often, spirit, have I turned to thee. That is how often, he says, when I was bowed down with the troubles, how often, when I was tormented with the privations of life, how often did I go back or fall back upon nature in order to uplift him, in order to give him peace and tranquility, he says. And this river Wye, which has been the wanderer through the woods, how often in spirit he has turned to thee. And that is why he says that when I was a child, then I came among these hills. Like a roe, I bounded over the mountains by the sides of the deep rivers and the lonely streams, wherever nature led. More than a man flying from something that he dreads than the one who sought the thing he loved. So I was carefree, careless, like a roe, that is a small deer, that is the baby deer. I bounded from the hills to the valleys and flitting from place to place and looking at the stars, the skies, every aspect of nature in a carefree, careless manner. Nothing became impressive upon my mind, he says, for nature at that time and the coarser pleasure he calls the pleasure that he got when he was a child from nature, he says, he calls it a coarse pleasure, coarse, that is unrefined, not the refined pleasures, but the coarse pleasures that were unrefined as it is during. If you ask a child, why do you like flowers? Or what is there in the beauty of a red rose? What is there? What do you find the goodness in a rose? He will not be able to define. He says, well, I like it. And if you offer him daffodils, he says, well, I like this also. If you offer him, bring him across a rabbit, or give him a rabbit to play with, he will enjoy. But why? He will not be able to define. Because pets like rabbits, dogs, parrots, they are all the same to him. Because he does not give or find any meaningful existence in the presence of these natural surroundings or these natural animals. So he says the glad animal movements which were present at that time in my childhood. With the passage of time, with the coming of maturity, that is, as I passed into my adolescence age, all these pleasures, these coarser pleasures, they say they fainted. And what haunted me at that time when I became mature, when I became adolescence? The sound, the colors, the forms, the shapes, all these things I was able to visualize. That is the sensuous pleasure in nature that I was able to vitalize, he says. I cannot paint what I was then because the sounding cataract haunted me like a passion. The tall rock, the mountain, and the deep and gloomy wood, their colors and their forms were then to me an appetite, a feeling and a love. That is, their forms, their colors, the shape were an appetite. That is, this is something which I wanted to devour. This is something what I wanted to inhabit within myself. But they out of love for all these forms and colors and shapes of things, I was able. So, I mean, my communion with nature, as Wordsworth says, was not that I'm going to discern any meaning into these forms and shape, but they were the sensual pleasure that I got. So, in a way, this sensuous part of Wordsworth's poetry, pleasure, you can say, from nature is similar to Keats' sensuousness. That is, Keats was a sensuous poet, and he, of course, could feel this, or rather, get the sensibility from nature as Wordsworth was able to find during his adolescence. And then at that time, I did not need a remoter charm. I did not need the presence of anything else, and neither did I want to exercise my mind in order to find a deeper interest into the life. So he says that no any interest unborrowed from the eye. That is whatever is perceptible, whatever I can see, whatever I can discern, whatever I can feel, that was all in all to me. It is not that I'm going to exercise my imagination, my mind. But then with the passage of time, he grew into a man. But that time is also past, and all its aching joys that I felt from pleasure, that I got from nature, all its dizzy raptures, he says, now all have become faint, all have diminished and vanished. But I do not repent. Wordsworth says, I do not repent because I have lost those pleasures, those aching joys I've lost, because I am gifted. There are other gifts which have followed. That is, if you lose one thing, you gain another. So other gifts have followed, he says, and these gifts, which are giving me abundant recompense, that is something which, when you lose something and you get something else, then that is a compensation. That is, instead of this, you are getting that. So, a compensation. So, he says, in compensation, what I got from nature is that I have learned to look on nature not as in the hour of thoughtless youth, but hearing oftentimes the still, sad music of humanity, nor harsh, nor grating, though of ample power to chasten and subdue. Because he says, now I have learned something else. Now I have been able to see the miseries of man, the torments of man, the still sad music of humanity. That it is not only the sensuous aspects of nature, you can say, the beauty of nature, the bliss that I could get from nature. That is not all what I am discerning, but I am seeing into the life of things. I am discerning what is behind nature. That is the presence of man in nature. I can hear. And this is, he says, that this, which I was not able to pursue, because what is youth? Youth is thoughtless. Youth acts on the spur of the moment and is not guided by the thought, but whatever the others are doing, you are simply acting and reacting according to your impulses, but not according to your thoughts. But now he says, oftentimes I'm hearing, after experiencing the torments of the French Revolution, undergoing that period of 5 years, he has learned to look upon nature not only as for its beauty and love, but also looking upon the spiritual presence in nature. So he says, and I have felt a presence that disturbs me with a joy of elevated thought, a sense sublime of something far more deeply interfused, whose dwelling is in the light of the setting sun, and the round ocean, and the living air, and the blue sky, and in the mind of man. So I can feel that, you can say, a presence that disturbs me with the joy of elevated thought. He says, a sense sublime. And now, notice, children, the sense sublime, the sublimity which he talks of, this is that spiritual feeling, the presence of the divinity, that disturbs me. And that is not what I'm seeing around me, but I'm seeing in the hills, in the mountains, in the sky, and in nature everywhere. This sense of sublimity I am feeling everywhere. And this sense of sublimity is a motion and a spirit that impels all thinking things, that forces, I mean, that guides, that inspires, that leads on, that moves on all objects of all thoughts and rolls through all things. That is, it is presence in everything. Therefore, he says, I'm still a lover of meadows and the woods and the mountains and of all that I behold from this green earth, of all the mighty world of eye and ear. That is, of all the mighty world of eye and ear, meaning to say, whatever I can see and whatever I can hear, every aspect of sight and sound, every visibility and invisibility, I'm able to discern, I'm able to comprehend, I'm able to visualize, not from my heart, but from my mind. Because I realize now that God is not only in nature, but God is in man also. So, looking into the sufferings of the man, into the miseries of the man, and trying to comprehend them and trying to bring a compensation or benefiting them or doing something good for them for the goodness of others, that will turn me into a better man. That will make me spiritually elevated. And he says, well pleased to recognize in nature and the language of the sense the anchor of my purest thought. That is the anchor. That is what is deeply embedded, deeply rooted in my thoughts, by realizing that nature to me is not only a living entity, but nature is the nurse, the guardian of my heart, the soul of my moral being. So, nature is not only a teacher, nature is not only the guide, but it is the nurse also, the balm to the hurt minds, and the guardian, caretaker of my heart and soul, and the very living soul it is. So, what nature can give me, and what I can do with the presence of nature in my life, that is the presence of God, the presence of spirituality within me. And all this which I have discerned from nature, he later on, because his sister Dorothy is with him, he invokes to nature as a goddesses and says that all these gifts which you have bestowed upon me, I want Dorothy also to realize them. And I want nature to endow my sister Dorothy also with all those gifts which nature has given me, and which nature has made me not only a poet of nature, but a poet of man. Had filled my heart with this feeling of sublimity, divinity. Thank you.